I want to go ahead and take this moment to introduce our speaker. And after the introduction of the speaker, we're going to have a solo by Sasha Massey, A Change is Gonna Come. Dr. Shawn Wilson has over 25 years of experience in state government, having been appointed or served in an executive role for 3 governors and 1 lieutenant governor. After serving as the chief of staff for under 2 administrations, Shawn was appointed secretary of Louisiana's Department of Transportation and Development, a person who held that position from 2016 to March of this year. Dr. Wilson transformed the agency to be more collaborative and efficient, and he actually taught them how to leverage the resources and the multimodal infrastructure that we use in Louisiana today. During his tenure as secretary, the agency awarded more than $5.2 billion in construction projects. And I want you to know that Acadiana was blessed because of him. I'm gonna stop right now, and I think we owe Shawn a little clap. Somebody said money talks. Dr. Wilson's views his public service as a ministry, and he's continued to break barriers from time to time, serving as president of the Student Government Association at the University of Louisiana, ULL. The most recently, he served as the president of the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials and chairman in the Transportation Research Board. And that is a lofty position to have. He is a lifelong Democrat. Dr. Wilson is a man of faith and family, having served his congregation not only as a teacher, but a church trustee and a ministry leader. He lives in the great city of Lafayette with his wife of 27 years. Wave your hand, Miss Rocky. There she is. And together, it's okay, clap. That's all right. That's all right. Without Rocky, we wouldn't have Shawn, trust me. And together, they have 2 wonderful children, Joshua and Sean Denise Arsenault, and a son-in-law and 2 grandchildren. Dr. Wilson earned his ABA in Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Louisiana, and he holds a master's in Public Administration degree, as well as a PhD in Public Policy from the Nelson Mandela School of Public Policy at the University of Southern. Now, here's the deal. This man is going to be the next governor of the great state of Louisiana. Before he comes up, we all need to know that it's about time for a change. Amen? Amen. Change don't come on its own. You've got to make a change. All right? You need people who buy into the project of making a change. Sam Cooke, back in the 1960s, understood that a change was coming. Now, he didn't make it to see the change, but he knew that it was coming. I want y'all to join me. The words are in your program. Join me, join Sasha, as she leads us in this wonderful song, as she ushers in this great public servant of ours.
sky. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Yes, well, I go to the movie and I go downtown, but somebody keeps telling me don't you and your kind hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Yes, yes it will. And then I go to my brother, and I say, brother, help me please. But then he winds up knocking me way down on my knees. There's been times when I thought I couldn't last for much more too long, but now I know I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will.
Now, wasn't that a beautiful, beautiful rendition? I am so excited to be with you all this evening, and I am excited that the pastor recognized my lovely wife, because on tomorrow we will have been married 28 beautiful years. And because I've been on the campaign trail, I haven't had a chance to buy a gift. And so I planned this wonderful banquet to celebrate you tonight and those 28 wonderful, wonderful years. In all seriousness, it has been a joy every step of the way. You know, I am no stranger to this event, and as the pastor reminded me back for the very first Juneteenth celebration, I was here and with the community celebrating such an event. And it's a very important event because it's evolved, and we were just talking about this is no different than when I was growing up in the 70s and the 80s, the fight to make Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a holiday, and what that meant, and the journey it took to get there, because those things just don't happen overnight. I'm happy to tell you that as a candidate for governor in the great state of Louisiana, who just so happens to be an African American, I clearly recognize that I stand on the shoulders of giants, those who are known and unknown all across this country. Folks like W.E.B. Du Bois, folks like Ida B. Wells and Shirley Chisholm, folks like George Bowles, others here in this community that have led the way for leadership and public service in the great state of Louisiana. And yes, in this race for governor, I stand on the shoulders of folks like William Jefferson and Cleo Fields and any and every other African American who has run for a statewide office here in the state of Louisiana. They planned for a tomorrow, and a better tomorrow is absolutely on its way. And so we all must do what we need to do to make this day better for all of the people of the great state and our future. And it's our time and our turn now to question and to dare to answer that transformation and to answer that reform. You know, as an African American, I'm ever so familiar with the challenges that we face to advance our community, our state, our nation, and yes, our world. The Constitution of these United States grants each of us an inalienable right to life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. And no state, no community, no city shall contradict those mandates. But oftentimes, as people of color, we find barriers are being placed because of the skin tones that we possess. These barriers pose challenges to us living out the true meaning of that Constitution and make us unable to enjoy the rights and privileges that our country has promised us. You know, the reality for people of color is that though we were born with those inalienable rights, that there are people working to take away those rights even today in these United States. They are working to hinder our progress because of our skin tone and the communities that we live in. They are thankfully not going to be successful. If it weren't for organizations like the NAACP and organizations like the Divine Nine that have worked on the battlefield fighting to ensure that we have equal rights and equal justice, we would not be where we are today. If it weren't for organizations like the National Urban League seeking economic prosperity, we would not be where we are today. And if it weren't for the faith leaders all across this community that are striving to provide spiritual intervention in a society with Christian-based leadership, we would not be where we are today. And as a matter of fact, in this historical footprint of these organizations, if we didn't have them, we would be creating them today. There's still a need to fight for the helpless and the hopeless, and there's the less and the least of us that need our help, and the hurting and the crushed and the marginalized and the left behind, people who are sometimes known to be underdogs. The fight for equal pay, better and quality housing, quality education for all of our children, clean air, clean water, and the inclusion of grants and contracts, just the same old business that we have been fighting for every day, fairness in our government. The threats to voting rights and the realities of police brutality, the inequities of how educational resources are distributed, and the lack of access to affordable and quality health care and housing are still a challenge, not just for people of color, but for poor people all across this nation. Celebrating the emancipation of slaves and the delayed order issued by Major General Gordon Granger on June 19th in 1865, proclaiming freedoms for slaves that did not know that they were absolutely free. While this originated in Galveston, Juneteenth has since been observed all across the country on an annual basis, often broadly celebrating the African American diaspora and culture that we have created. And thanks to President Joe Biden, the president that we all helped elect, it is now a national holiday. And thanks to the leadership, yes, thanks to the leadership of Governor John Bel Edwards and the legislators that fought for this issue in our state capitol, it is now a holiday that he proclaimed today for this year in 2023 to celebrate this national recognition. While national problems persist, it is ideal to take a step back and to reflect not just on how far we've come, but how much more we have in front of us to do. So let me just talk a little bit about what we have left to do. What's most ironic about the injustices and inequalities and inequities for people of color in America is that truth and racism and the institution of racism is having a firm hold on this nation, a country where all Americans are living their best and ideally most full potential. You hear folks talking about wanting a great America. Well, we will never see a great America until all people, even people of color, get to use their gifts, their talents, and are free from the vile victimization of racism in these United States. Each of us, every one of us in this room, would be far better if we didn't have to deal with racism. Injustices anywhere is still a threat to justice where? Everywhere. And there is hope because God is on the side of the right and the righteous. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, we shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends toward justice. Now, I stand here as just a little nappy-headed kid from New Orleans. Dr. now Shawn Wilson, a graduate of UL and the Southern University in Baton Rouge, and I too still face challenges being an African American in my life. Despite how much education or wealth we may build, the color of one's skin is still viewed as a threat. And I'm here to tell you today that I'm somewhat ashamed to say to you that I've met people on the campaign trail that both black and white that will look at me boldly and say, very respectfully might I say, what makes you think that you should be the governor? What makes you think that this state is ready to elect a black governor? One candidate in this race even said, why is he even running? The idea that we will face those types of challenges have nothing to do with the content of my character or the competence that I possess. It's the color of my skin that creates that doubt. So to answer that question, I simply look them in the eye with a calm, humble tone and a slight smirk and say to them, if they care about this state, if they care about having the most qualified, capable candidate, if they care about getting things done right, the rest of Louisiana will join them in that and have the gumption inside of them to vote for competence and commitment and compassion and vote for the most qualified, who just so happens to be an African American, and he just so happens to be standing in front of you tonight. Racism, discrimination, and the self-fulfilling prophecy, my friends, of can'tism, and that's not a real word, I just made it up because I hear it so often, you can't do it. The can'tisms will not be tolerated each time it raises its ugly head. You can be confident that it shall not be tolerated by me, nor shall it be tolerated by you, and will be overcome with tenacity and intellect and consistency. I believe it was Shirley Chisholm that said, don't listen to the voices on the outsides that said you can't. Listen to the voice on the inside that says you absolutely can. My friends, opportunity must be provided regardless of the color of your skin, but rather the content of your character that we've all talked about. Louisiana still needs the best and the brightest, and the same yardstick must be used to measure everyone's capacity. The fact is, no matter how much we accomplish, none of us are exempt from those cruel realities if you are a person of color or if you happen to be someone in a much lower socioeconomic status than the masses. And though our nation has come so far on race and cultural relations, we do have a long, long way to go. They push back when they stop allowing college students to use IDs in schools to vote. They push back when they allow books in schools that teach the true realities of racism in our country to be removed. They push back when you go to Colfax, Louisiana, and see the untruths that have been taught and taught and taught and talked about for decades, and until the truth is revealed, there's still resistance when they push us back. They push us back when they divide us on issues related to gender identification and a woman's right to privacy to make medical decisions with her body. The enemy pushes us back when they divide the black vote and put people in races to hurt qualified candidates only for a pork chop sandwich and a glass of Kool-Aid. They will offer you t-shirts and $1 to go do something that's never going to be good for you. And just in case we have the person in the room that's on those other candidates filming, I'm going to smile at you and say, yes, I did say that. Because if you remember, Joseph was sold into slavery and it only cost 20 shekels. And I think Jesus was sold out for what? 30 pieces of silver. So it is going to happen over and over again, but we shall prevail. You see, I'm here to say, when you elect me as your governor, I will allow the hard work of those, I will not allow the hard work of those who have labored to give us the right to vote, those who died to ensure that justice would be achieved, to go in vain and allow them to push us back further. It was Reverend Joseph Lowery's words that still carry meaning, that we've come too far and we've marched too long and we've prayed too hard and wept too bitter and bled too profusely and died too young to let anybody at this point turn us around. You see, I am the product. I am the product of the work of those historic figures and the local leaders that we know and we may not know, that we ought to be thankful for, the Andrew Youngs, the John Lewises, and the countless others who've paved the way for me to stand as a candidate here in the state of Louisiana. And there are two who are here that have been laboring for us. Senator Boudreaux and Representative Pierre deserve a huge round of applause. And I can say this boldly and proudly, there were no two more advocates that supported any and everything that Dr. Wilson did as secretary, and I am personally and eternally grateful for both of you gentlemen's support. And I extend that appreciation to the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus for working hard to push back on the divisions and the protecting the rights of the least of us. You see, the fight today is very similar to the fights of yesterday. It's a fight for good wages and equal access to jobs. I too will fight for those livable wages and for people's right to work free from discrimination and harassments. The fights haven't changed much. Just the time and the date stamp has changed. The battles of the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, all the way up to today are still alive, and as strong as our forefathers were, we have to fight to protect those rights as well. You see, in our state, we have led the fight against police brutality and killings of unidentified individuals like Alton Sterling, Ronald Green, and others. While they may not have been identified by the world, somebody's mama knew who they were. Somebody's brother or sister knew who they were. You see, the people that we elected negotiated peace in the streets and been a connector between the police and the community. Some of you have challenged school districts that treat kids and staff unfairly. You've marched to the Capitol for rights of healthy and whole lives, and you've registered voters to vote. You stood with leaders in the face of slander, and you've protected children from predators. And you're doing what our leaders intended us to do, and you're not letting up. You see, we have no place for hate and division in Louisiana or in this country. We can't sit idly by on the sidelines while people are elected to the legislature or the governor's office who are going to take serious steps to bring us back to the struggles of post-slavery, no different than those who continued to enslave people for those 2 months and 2 years before the emancipation was fully known to everyone. You see, they will be clandestine in taking away freedoms and criminalizing individuals and starving schools and closing hospitals and health clinics and removing resources from communities to create disinvestment and disproportionate investment like quality grocery stores and factories and pharmacies and jobs in towns and communities where people need them the most. You see, we can't take back those things in government once they're done. We can only go forward. So we need a government that's not going to have the frivolous spending like cutting health care, $100 million, that's going to be worth $500 million. We can't go back to the days of having a $2 billion deficit when you've actually got a $2 billion surplus because you had a governor and staff and legislators who insisted on doing the right thing, like paying down debt, like building infrastructure, like saving money for rainy days, like paying teachers more. Those are the things that are on the ballot this October. And as we celebrate Juneteenth, let us not focus just on what's been done, but focus on where we will go forward. So there's a few things I will say before I close for the first time. Some of you got that, some of you didn't. On matters of race and justice, here is where Dr. Wilson stands. As governor and head of this Louisiana executive branch, I will always use the power of the veto to legislate to prevent freedoms and attacks on any Louisianian because that's a way to protect all of Louisianians. We will work to ensure that our agencies that fall under the authority of the governor understand that there is no room for racial bias, no room for injustice or prejudices. That includes state police and every other agency in state government. On issues of having an inclusive economy, let me just give you the example, not of what I will do, but what I have done. When I became secretary, we had a budget of $1.4 billion, and 8.4% was dedicated to women and minority-owned businesses. When I left that department, the budget was $3.4 billion, and over 16% was going to minority and women businesses. That is what an inclusive community looks like. And guess what? Not only did the minority businesses do well, but the primes did well also, because the pie got bigger and the slice got bigger, and we all were happy. My wife is an educator, so I need to talk about education innovation or I cannot go home tonight. I will tell you that I will work with every school in the state of Louisiana that has resources for our children to succeed, regardless of being urban or rural, majority, black, white, and or in wealthier or poorer districts. It starts with what's in the classroom. Tip O'Neill said all politics are local, and I'm here to tell you that all education is local. It's that teacher and that child and the relationship between the two that will produce success for that child to grow and earn. See, education, as I believe, is really the only way that you can break the cycle of poverty and begin to ensure that every child in Louisiana gets the education that they deserve that we can give them. It's going to start with competent teachers, state-of-the-art facilities, multiple educational pathways, be it trade schools or four-year universities. And as a product of an HBCU, having had 2 degrees from there, I fully support protecting and preserving all of our HBCUs here in the state of Louisiana. And speaking of preserving, think about how important it is to take care and preserve the temple, the body that you have. Assuring health and well-being of our state is going to be an extreme priority for me. When I started this campaign, I was the only candidate that said we were going to continue the Medicaid expansion, also known as Obamacare. Several of my opponents have said, yes, we're going to try to keep it now. Well, if you've been taking us to court over and over again, what will you do when you have the executive authority to not sign it, and where will it be? You see, 500,000 people now have insurance because of that one act that Governor Edwards did on his first day. The budget is better today because of what the governor did on that first day. Our healthcare system is intact because of what the governor did on that first day. Imagine having cancer or needing chemotherapy or being uninsured. Imagine needing that kidney transplant and being uninsured. Diabetes, high blood pressure treatments, medication costs, all of that is impacted by the Medicaid expansion. It is, in fact, my friends, saving lives and keeping Louisiana on a positive path. We must also fight the opioid epidemic that's facing far too many families and treat it like the crisis that it is. Families who have lost loved ones addicted to treatments or lacking the treatments. I'm committed to fighting that and the fentanyl crisis in this country and in this state. You see, my family is no different than many of your families that have lost folks to that epidemic, and it's time that we address it in a serious way. And you can't just deal with fentanyl without talking about violence. And then you address the violence, you have to be tough, but you also have to be smart. You see, the rest of the folks are saying, let's just lock him up and throw away the key. That does not make you safer one bit. You've got to provide the intervention on the front end before that happens to ensure that they are better trained, better capable to deal with the pressures of life and respond accordingly to their neighbors. That is what good government looks like. That is what being smart and tough on crime looks like. Holding individuals accountable to do a better job in our communities. And there's so much more I could talk about to be the candidate that you deserve, that you will have in Governor Wilson. But I don't want others to steal my story and to take those ideas because they don't have any of their own worth sharing. Now, as I close for the second time, I want to remind you that this country has only had 5 governors who have been African American. And let me just tell you a little history lesson of what that looks like. It started here in the great state of Louisiana with Oscar Dunn as lieutenant governor here. His predecessor, who was governor, had a fight with him, and they fought over what that was. When Dunn died very early, we had PBS pinchback. And then when PBS became lieutenant governor, there was an effort to impeach the previous governor, and he left and resigned, and then PBS pinchback became governor. And I find it interesting that the elected officials that we have today are looking and starting to recognize PBS pinchback for the leader that he was. And I'm happy to tell you that the representatives from the state of Louisiana have done that exceptionally well, honoring Terry Landry and recently honoring Governor Edwards. And I'm happy to tell you that the building where I served as secretary for the Department of Transportation has been named PBS Pinchback. That was in 1873, but there are other states that have elected African-American governors. Other states, and a fourth that has had someone follow the same pathway that Pinchback did. And here's what you saw. Douglas L. Wilder was elected in Virginia in 1990. I remember the night of that election and the pride that we saw. Deval Patrick was elected in Massachusetts in 2007, and he served 8 years. And at the same time, Elliot Spitzer was removed from the position of governor in the state of New York, and David Patterson followed the PBS pinchback pathway and was appointed governor for 2 years. And just this year, Maryland elected my fraternity brother, Brother Wesley Watande Omari Moore, who had never been elected before, to be governor of the state of Maryland. So I'll ask you, as I close for the third time, what will happen in Louisiana in October of 2023. We can elect the best candidate for governor who happens to be an African American. We can elect an African American governor who has a PhD in public policy and has served for 25 years working with Republicans and Democrats alike. We can elect a governor who, before he announced for governor, was one of the most popular candidates, popular secretaries in the governor's cabinet until he announced. You can elect a governor who can get things done and has proven it. And if you don't think we can, if you've been bit by the bug of Kantism, just recognize that 32% of the voters in the state of Louisiana are African American, and we unfortunately in this country still vote along those racial lines. So in a state with a jungle primary, that tells me we ought to be bit by the bug of Kanism and not Kantism. There are several who tried before me. Because of them and because of you, I think we can do this and make this a possibility. Here's my pledge to you. I pledge to wake up every morning as your governor with God and our ancestors and you and every citizen of this great state on my mind. You see, the guy. I am the guy that had the honor and the privilege of sitting at the seat with Kathleen Babineau Blanco, the state's first female governor, and I've worked hard and long as your secretary of the Department of Transportation, building bridges and not burning them. I've been building roads and bridges and highways, and I will work even harder to build children and families to ride on those roads and bridges and highways to a future that we can all be proud of. I commit to you that I will keep at the forefront to bring jobs to this state and keep our children in this state with living wages and equal pay. The poor and the have-nots don't have a lobbyist in my administration, but they will have a lobbyist working for them in the governor's office called Governor Wilson, working for the little guy every day across the state of Louisiana. And this is my last and final close. Our best days in this state are ahead of us, and I believe the good people of this state want and can continue to want and dream of the dream of our ancestors, and together, folks, we can absolutely deliver that. I ask for your prayers, I ask for your support, I ask for your vote, even the guys from the other candidates that are filming me tonight. Thank you for being here and spreading my message. Use it wisely when you can. God bless you. Let's register, let's vote, let's win. We will win. God bless you, and God bless the great state of Louisiana.